The all-new Alfa Romeo Tonale. So what do you need to know? Well, this is Alfa Romeo's first ever PHEV, at least here in the US market. And on top of that, it's their newest and cheapest car. This vehicle competes in a class of vehicles like the BMW X3, X1, Q1, Q3, Q5, GV70, NX. The thing about this is it's a plug-in hybrid, and this will be the last ever internal combustion Alfa sold here in the US as a new product. What do you want to know about the interior space? Well, it's on the smaller side. I don't fit behind myself. It's basically the size of what you're expecting for this class of car. With the rear seats up, you're looking at about 23 cubic feet of cargo capacity, though there's a fairly large opening. With the rear seats down, you're looking at about 50.5. It's a quiet cabin. You have good visibility. The seating position is actually very good. You can sit nice and low, or you can raise the seat up. You have very good visibility at the back of this thing despite its styling. And I think all of the touch points in this car, like the steering wheel, shifter, physical HVAC and infotainment controls, all feel nice. And as long as you don't touch the hard dash or the lower trim plastics, it feels pretty nice in here. You can kind of forget its eco-car roots. The infotainment in this car runs Android Automotive. It's very fast acting. It works great. It's paired to a pretty decent optional Harman Kardon audio system. The gauge cluster is all digital, and it's easy to get through, and it has some fun design motifs like vintage or future or minimal. The steering wheel controls themselves are fairly easy to use. I will bring up, however, if you have presidential or smaller hands, you may find it difficult to use the stocks behind these optimistically large paddle shifters. The steering wheel out of this car is ripped out of a sports car, and it's a bit cheeky to say the least. Other than that, quiet cabin, things for the most part feel fairly premium. Everything's logically laid out, and there's good storage. With that, let's head into the shop. And with that, let's head into the shop. In the shop with the lovely Alfa Romeo Tonale. So what do you need to know? Well, first off, this has a mechanical twin called the Dodge Hornet, which Dodge will tell you is the first muscle car CUV. Both the Tonale and the Hornet are built on the same platform known as small wide, which is Stellantis's global small car or small CUV architecture, and it is front-wheel drive biased or front-wheel drive based. This is McPherson strut front and rear, and essentially none of the suspension components are aluminum. Everything's steel on this thing, which is a bit disappointing seeing that as tested, this is $55,000. So to buy this thing, you are walking over vehicles like the BMW X3, which is built on CLAR, which is a rear-wheel drive architecture, the Acura RDX, the Q5, the Mercedes GLA. Let me tell you, there are other options in this segment. The other thing to bring up is the suspension tuning itself. They are adaptive dampers front and rear, and they are tied to the DNA drive mode selector. So this thing can go soft or firm based upon your drive modes. That also affects the programming of the drivetrains, which we'll talk about in a second. The other thing to bring up, though, is they did cover this thing up with as many NVH panels as possible to quiet down this eco platform. The one con of that, and this is the only vehicle I've ever lifted that I've seen this on, they've added access panels over the lift points. So you have to go around to lift this vehicle and remove 4 plastic push pins on each corner of this car. And I will tell you, this took more time to lift than a Lamborghini Huracan STO, and is more difficult to lift than essentially any exotic car, because most premium vehicles that have NVH panels have little access pucks. So essentially it's no bother to lift at all. For some reason, this Tonale decided to go with this, and when this thing seizes up and gets covered in dirt and dust and salt, I can almost guarantee you every one of these push clips are going to break, and your service technician or yourself are going to go absolutely nuts. Powertrain. You get a 1.3 liter 4-cylinder multi-air direct injected turbocharged engine in the front that makes about 180 horsepower, and it puts its power down through a 6-speed Aisin automatic gearbox, and you have an electric motor in the rear. It's 90 kilowatts, and total system output is about 285 horsepower, and that's good for 0 to 60 in about 5.5 seconds. There is a battery pack. It is 15.5 kilowatt hours. That means you get an electric range of about 30 miles. The one thing I will say about this car is, despite its roots or eco-car roots, it does handle reasonably well. That electric motor in the back does torque vector. The brakes in this vehicle are 4-pot Brembos in the front, and they are brake-by-wire. That's the only way they can get all these electronic systems to work together along with the safety suite. Past that though, I think it's time for us to go take this for a quick drive. Let's launch this right into a corner, Mark. We are in the Alfa Romeo Tonale, Mark. This is Alfa's first PHEV model, or at least first one here in the United States, and it represents their entry-level small CUV. It competes with a lot of different cars, BMW X3, BMW X1, Q5, Q3, NX, a lot of different vehicles, but the advantage that this has is it's a plug-in hybrid, and it's from Italia, Mark. So what do you think about this thing?
Jack, it is best in class.
That's good, Mark. It's good that you're not talking about this car because I don't want our reps to come after us and break your kneecaps Joe Pesci style. Look, in the shop segment, I was pretty down on the architecture that this is on, and versus its other premium competitors, this is definitely saddled by being McPherson strut front and rear, being shared on an eco architecture, or at least with the BMW and the Audi, you can definitely make the case that at least the Q5 and the X3 have much more premium roots. What I will say is this thing, at least in suburbia, when you're trying to huck this thing around corners and you drive it within its sort of basic limits, does a really good job at not feeling ponderous. It has reasonable body control. When you take it out of dynamic, it's nice and soft, but when you're in corners or when it's wet out, I drove this in a bad rainstorm, despite making 285 horsepower, it does not just wash out the front end. The electric motors in the back kick in and get this thing to not totally understeer off the road. There is a lot of torque steer though out of this, turbo lag out of this 1.3 liter four cylinder. Basically, nobody's home for the first 1,002 RPM and then the electric motors and the boost kick in. Man, past that, I know you're not saying a whole lot other than towing the company line here, but this isn't anywhere as bad as I thought it would be, and it does represent at least an option in the segment. If you can get past its underpinnings and you just take it at face value and you're assuming it's going to be reliable, it's a fairly refined, different vehicle in this segment. And the best part about it, Mark, is you can drive it to your favorite restaurant, as I'm about to, and show that you are a cultured individual. So, do you have anything to add?
The Alfa Romeo Tonale offers a distinctive, sensual, and forward-looking design.
Perfect, Mark. We're almost at our destination, long last. Oh, I should bring up something else. The fuel economy and, of course, the electric driving characteristic of this car. You have about 30 miles to work with in pure EV, and it does a good job, man. It's just like everything else in this class. It's fairly refined, it's somewhat limiting, but if you're driving around in suburbia, which most people are, it's perfect. And the fuel economy with our driving style has put this in the mid to high 20s, almost 30 miles a gallon, but alas, Mark, we're where we need to be.
Finally, I can be myself again. Take me around the front. I don't want to walk. It's hard, being in this country where you don't feel like your family. Finally, I feel like I'm home again. Just stop right here.
Final thoughts on the Alfa Romeo Tonale. So what do I think? Well, first off, as we beat it to death in this video, this is a competitive class with a lot of different options. And the thing that hurts the Alfa is that it's built on a non-premium architecture. It's hard to compete in a class where the dedicated luxury cars have better underpinnings to begin with. That said, let's talk about the pros. It handles great. You would be shocked to learn what its mechanical brethren are when you take this thing around corners. The rear diff does a good job getting you in and out of corners. The front end works well. It handles really well, and that's a big surprise for this class of vehicle. I thought it would not do that, and it does. The exterior styling is uniquely Alfa, if you appreciate that, and the interior, they've done a really good job, again, dressing up a not premium platform. It looks good. There's good touch points. The steering wheel's nice. The seats are great. And it doesn't feel like a car that puts zero effort into the interior space. And in some ways, it's nicer than its competitors. And the interior technology, specifically Android Automotive, does work very well. Cons. It's an unproven PHEV from Alfa Romeo with a bad history of reliability, at least as a brand. The reps will tell you that they are doing their best to improve their JD Power scores and their dealership experience. And I do believe them. But as a customer, moving into an unproven product from a risky brand, at least historically, makes it difficult to justify. So if you're one of those people who's willing to take the risk, I don't think this is inherently a bad product. I do think it's worth at least a test drive. The PHEV side of the product works well, it handles well, it looks interesting, and it's not like everything else on the road. It is expensive, however, at $55,000, which means if you were going to buy one of these, I'd probably find a cheaper trim or less options on the vehicle to make it a little bit more compelling from a value proposition. Past that though, thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon.